All right, folks. We are live, like really live. You know what really live means? Really live means, oh, right, signing books out at the booth out there. And then you say, you know, you're giving a talk in 4 minutes. You should probably go. Like, oh, yeah. I just covered a lot of ground in a hurry. And I don't mean that metaphorically. So first of all, I'm going to tell you, as I'm plugging in my power cord, just in case, if any of you were here last year, this is an encore presentation, okay? What that means is I gave this exact talk last year at this exact conference, and it went well enough. Were you okay? Oh, thank you. That right there is the one? Yeah. Perfect. I appreciate the help. Not really sure that I need power, but you never know. Famous last words, right? Okay, so the talk last year went well enough that the organizers of the conference asked me if I would run it back, and I loved that idea because I like this talk a lot. But anyway, if it starts to seem, if you were here last year or if you watched some of last year's presentations on YouTube and this starts to seem really familiar, it's not deja vu, okay? So I won't be offended if a few of you flee at some point. I understand, okay? I just want to be clear about that ahead of time. So, am I on screen yet? It doesn't necessarily look like I am. How do I get on the screen? Oh, 6. Press the 6. That's how it works. Is that right? Woo! Okay. So, let's dive in, shall we? See, I made one update. Okay? One update to the slides. A lot of effort went into this. Okay? All right. So, the sexiest custom visualization you will see at the entire conference. It's a bold claim. Right? And this is what the president of a publicly traded company said when he first saw this visualization. Okay? It was an exploratory, like, quote unquote, prototype that turned into the real thing without any changes. But it was, what about this? Maybe we should do this. Here's the finished thing. And the president saw that and said, I want you to press the gas pedal as hard as you can. We were just hoping for him to say, okay, cool. All right? But instead, the strongest possible endorsement. Are you ready? I know you've seen some hot visualizations at this conference. Okay? Here it is. You ready? There it is. Okay? Yeah. Isn't that hot? Come on, that's the best thing ever, right? But this is what led to I want you to press the gas pedal as hard as you can. Not kidding. Now, the numbers are all faked, and a lot of the names of metrics have been sanitized to protect the innocent, okay? But other than that, this is 100% authentic. And the thing I want to lodge in your brains about this is that there's nothing quite like seeing a bunch of very useful metrics about your own business that you've never seen before, that you've only spoken of in whispers, some legendary future in which you might actually know what you're doing and have the information that you need to properly manage your business. Like when you're selling something in the abstract, really impressive visuals are crucial. But when you're dealing with someone's absolutely mission critical information, sometimes just having the right numbers can elicit an amazing visceral reaction. Right? So in some ways, yeah, this visualization made a stock price go up. Does it get hotter than that? You can sands of time all you want, right, with those crazy custom visuals, right? But this one made a stock price go up. Okay, and it continues to do so. All right, here's a quiz. I love this quiz. What's the world's most popular programming language? Oh, come on. You saw last year's talk. Why didn't you guys leave? or you've run into me before or something. Of course it's not Excel. Excel's not a programming language. Okay, fine. So this is, the typical answers go something like this. People usually run with Java, and if you're talking about, specific kinds of programming languages, that is the truth. But Excel has over 100 million programmers, and I mean that literally. I don't mean, the people who write VBA macros in Excel. Excel formulas are a programming language. They are a cleverly disguised programming language. And the number of Excel programmers in the world outnumber all of the other developer audiences combined. That's the truth. It's the business programmers. But unfortunately for the business programmers of the world, the Excel programmers of the world looks at Excel primarily and sees Word with a grid. Okay? It's an office document that these people are producing. They don't see these people, and some of you are these people, right? How many of you are like either current or former VLOOKUP and pivot people? Okay. Whoa, see that? Look at all those programmers, right? Business programmers. The world runs on your backs. I mean that both in the good way and the bad way. So they give us this software code slide. This is this is part of the template, the slide template. It seems like a shame to waste it. So let me show you some programming. Okay, the snippet of code at the top. I think that's Java. I just sort of like Googled for give me a Java sample, just some sample Java, right? And then I Googled give me an Excel formula, and I picked the one that looked the funkiest, right? But of course, we're not used to seeing the Excel formula or things like that at the bottom. We're not used to seeing it in that kind of format. The spacing is off. Like this is entirely too clear, right? To read this. This is how the business programmers of the world have to deal with it. It looks more like that, right? Now it's an Excel formula, right? But it's funny. All you have to do is indent it. And you're like, oh yeah, that is code, isn't it? Right? Of course, Excel programmers, they have to deal with something incredible. Like, look at right here, if I hover, like C15 to C35, that's a variable name, okay? Up here, you get to say things like average of neighbors, or you get to name your variables in some way that's actually clear and understandable. Whereas Excel inflicts, traditional Excel anyway, okay, inflicts this sort of hypersymbolic syntax. What the heck is C15 to C35? You have to go look to find out what it is. It's one of the most difficult. What I'm really getting around to is that not only is Excel the most common by far, it's actually in some very important ways like the most difficult programming language on the planet. And you're still succeeding. Way to go, you. Imagine what happens when we give you a cleaner version, an upgrade to your tool set. And that's why you're here, right? That's what we're here for. Okay. And just, you gotta, anytime you can throw a Simon Peyton Jones reference into a talk, you got to. It's like a Yahtzee game, right? I just scored a point. But yeah, this is a researcher that I had the pleasure of meeting several times when I worked at Microsoft, who is rightfully obsessed with something that the industry calls functional programming languages, AKA formulas. Academic topic, it's awesome. All right, so why is it so popular? Why is Excel the most popular programming language, and by such a wide margin? Well, let's talk about a business user. That's another old joke, right? There's only two industries in the world that refer to their customers as users. The illegal drugs trade, right? And software. But this is a business user, okay? And they know a lot. A lot of you in the room are business people, more so than you are, let's say, like tech people. But even if you're a tech person, it's good to know what makes the business so important, isn't it? What a business user knows about their business if they could write it down, and sort of dump it all onto paper, it would fill volumes of old-fashioned encyclopedias. It's a lot of information, okay? It's crucial. It informs everything that needs to happen in terms of analytics. Right? You can't just skip that. It's not about writing good code, or like clean algorithms. You got to start with what the business knows and what it needs, and all those crazy little exceptions that we all know about. Okay, noisy real world. So now the traditional way to, if you're going to be responsible about an analytics project or about a BI project, is to get someone that's spent, instead of spending a lifetime getting good at the business, they've spent a lifetime getting good at these high-end tool sets. And this is the way the world has worked for, decades, until recently. But again, in order to do anything, to achieve anything, you need to essentially mind meld everything that the business knows with everything that the technology team knows. And this is why these projects run forever. The average length of a traditional BI project is 17 months. And I'll tell you, in my experience, my extensive experience with this, that's basically the point of exhaustion rather than the point of completion. That's the point where people are prepared to just sort of say, you know what, let's pretend it's good. Because it's killed them. And that's not okay. So instead of that, what the business has traditionally done, because you just can't operate that way. If you have Excel, it turns out Excel is learnable by the business. And that's what makes it amazing. It might not be the best language to use for a lifetime, like its variables and things like that aren't so hot, right? Like, who really likes A1 syntax? For the first 10 minutes, A1 syntax is awesome, right? Like, wow, that was cool. But then it starts to pile up on you pretty quickly. But you can learn it, and that's the big difference. It's learnable by sort of like normal human beings, Like, you don't need a computer science degree for it. And so in that one brain, that one business person's brain, they communicate with themselves incredibly efficiently. They don't need to transmit all of their knowledge across this impossible barrier of meetings and requirements documents and emails and miscommunication and misunderstanding. They communicate with themselves incredibly efficiently. It sounds like a controversial statement, but actually, I don't think it should be. I think it should just be something we all just accept, that north of 99% of the cost of a traditional business intelligence project, or really almost any technical project, isn't writing the code, it's communication. Communication is what eats all of the time. Iteration and communication across human beings is incredibly inefficient when it's this subtle. So when you can communicate with yourself, it doesn't matter, sort of whether your tool set is necessarily industrial strength or not. You're going to get done in an eye blink relative to having to cooperate across teams. So a few hours, literally a few hours to get the first result, the first reasonable result, rather than 17 months. Like, that's going to be the answer every single time, right? Like, it's going to be incredibly rare that you actually go with the BI project in this old world. This is why export to Excel is the third most common button in any BI or any data application after OK and cancel. Okay? If you think eyeballs are being used against your reports, they're not. It's the export button. Take the export button out for a day, right? Just see what happens. You're going to hear about it. Okay, so the traditional BI tools had some advantages, some very significant advantages over Excel for a long time. And they've, I like to talk about it as if like, oh, those were hoarded by the, only kept for the BI industry and never shared with the business, never given to the Excel people. And these These 6 basically cover the important ones. Automatic refresh is a big deal, right? Traditional Excel spreadsheets don't possess this. Like just pumping the latest data through each iteration, of your spreadsheet, like, gotta make the donuts again this week, right? Like, gotta inform people. After a while, if a business person has built enough Excel spreadsheets, reports that are useful, their entire week is consumed just by maintaining and updating their spreadsheets. They reach sort of the saturation point, and now they are broken. As an employee, their manager has no idea why they can't do any more work. They don't understand it, but it's real. So auto refresh alone would be worth the price of admission to this new world, right? So these 6 advantages, just to make it clear, are no longer hoarded, okay? They are now part of the tool set that this conference represents. And it goes by lots of different names, like some of you are here for Power BI, some of you are here for what I call modern Excel. It's the same thing, okay? It's the DAX engine, it's the M engine. Those are the 2 things that make Microsoft an amazingly potent force in this space. I think they're the 2 best engines for dealing with data on the planet right now are the DAX engine and the M engine. And they live in both Excel in the form of Power Pivot and Power Query, aka Get and Transform, because Microsoft does love renaming things. And then they also live in the Power BI environment, but they just call them like modeling and get data in that environment. Anyway, so auto refresh, it's shared by both. There's also SSAS Tabular. Guess what? It's the same thing again. Microsoft has really got their act together. These are their engines. These are the horses for basically everything. Real contrast to the time, I spent 14 years at Microsoft. It was not nearly that unified in my day, back in the day. One version of the truth, the ability to publish centrally. And in fact, even honestly, folks, to build one version that actually works for everyone, it's not just like publishing it somewhere, like even getting to it was impossible before with traditional Excel, because everyone builds their own version, right? Security, that one's obvious. The 3 across the bottom are the ones that sort of get people's attention the most in the early going. The idea like to write a formula one time, just once, and have it automatically adjust to every question you throw at it, every new report that you want, every filter, every slice, every rearrange, drill down, whatever, the formulas just keep working. That's crazy. Excel doesn't do that, not traditional Excel. Every time you want to ask a different question, you rewrite the same formulas over and over again. Merging and splicing, this is huge too. Like, the world is not a single source table world. It's very rare that the questions that you need to ask and answer that are really important can be answered using a single table of source data. It's usually multiple systems that need to come together somehow and play a symphony together, okay? And traditional Excel was always, hey, it's got to be one table before we can do anything. That's why the VLOOKUP is so popular. It's not really popular, but it's popular. And then data capacity. In some ways, that's the least exciting, but still really important. I have a workbook that you're going to see that has a little bit of data in it, a little bit more than you're typically used to seeing in an Excel spreadsheet. All right. Yeah, why would you listen to me? Doesn't make any sense. Okay, just kidding. So yeah, like I said, 14 years at Microsoft, and I've written some books, but I think the thing that makes me, quote unquote, worth listening to is what I refer to as the field trip, which has been my life since 2010. So when I left Microsoft and started to, make my way through the real world, wow, was I surprised at what was really going on out there. Very different picture. Inside the Biodome in Redmond, we heard tales. And the tales were wildly distorted. I am blown away at what we've seen. And just to underline this, in an average career, you might see 10 different companies. The average person might work for 10 different companies. But of course, every 4.5 years is more than enough time to kind of forget what was going on at the other company, sort of like really lose the sense of it. Whereas, our team, our company, we crisscross the country like every week, virtually and physically, and we work with hundreds of companies in a single year. So we get to see where the bodies are buried over and over and over again. And this is where I think I have a fancy, check this out. Oh, the nationwide team of data ninjas, okay? That's our company, but it's where we accumulate this perspective. There's very little that's unique. Like everyone always tells us, like in this hushed conspiratorial tone, oh yeah, things are uniquely broken at our company, right? No, no, you don't even need to whisper it. We know before we walk in, right? Everyone's broken. That's the state of the world. Now that's the negative way to look at it. The positive way to look at it is the size of the opportunities available to all of us are ridiculously massive. Everywhere. The opportunity for incredible career growth, incredible organizational growth is just sitting there for the taking. The next big thing in data, there's always a lot of talk about this, the talking heads of the data world are always saying, oh, the next big thing is clearly going to be AI with algorithms over Hadoop. It's like, in fact, that might even be yesterday's thing. Like, no, the next big thing in data is truly doing the basics properly for the first time ever. Yeah. And like none of our massive success stories involve some magic insight algorithm that we came up with that's like, the secret to cold fusion. It's nothing like that. It's doing things that should have been obvious, but that were just so impossible to do with either of the traditional tool sets. When I say either of them, I mean traditional Excel or traditional BI. They both were such high friction and high inertia that they constrained our thinking even. When we take those limitations off, we can go do things that, again, aren't rocket science, but they're sort of like rebuilding the atrophied muscles in our brain that we should have had all along. All right, so this is a slide that I like to give basically in every talk. So if you've been to other talks of mine, this will be the one that you've seen before. I'm gonna move through this relatively quickly because I do want to get to the demos and have some good time for them. But these are 5 case studies, anonymized, sanitized, but 100% the truth. These all happened and continue to happen. These success stories didn't die off. So one very large company had spent 18 months on a data project. They'd tried 4 different times with traditional BI tool sets. And actually, some of them were newer. 4 different software vendors, 4 different platforms, 4 different consulting organizations. And all 4 times they had failed. They just completely failed and killed the project and wrote it off as sunk cost, which is a hard thing to do, by the way. I respect that they were willing to do that. They'd spent 6 figures of money, but their time lost, the time and suffering, spent. Those were the even bigger deals about this. And they hired us with this, this modern tool set, the modern Microsoft tool set, because they just frankly didn't think they had anything to lose relative to what all the dramatic failures. They were talking to us. They realized that they could spend a week with us, and if they didn't like us, they could fire us immediately. And they said, you should come out for a week. Please come out and visit us for a week, and we'll see what we can do with this. And we said, I don't know. A week is kind of a long time. Maybe just 2 days. Maybe we should just 2 days. We'll be done in 2 days. We don't want you to be disappointed and feel like you wasted your money on those other 3 days. They said, no, we really want you to come for a week. And they were right. It took us a whole week. But we built it end to end. We were done. And that thing is still running, okay? It's got 3 billion rows of data in it. And we built it in Power Pivot and then transferred it to SSAS Tabular, which is not even a conversion. Same formula, same everything. It's just like big Power Pivot. And there's a whole floor of a large headquarters high-rise in Southern California that right now is using that model that we built. It was done in a week. I'm sorry? Have I written about that? Yeah. Well, not really. It's always the best stories are often the most sensitive. You got to get permission. Yeah. The short version of the process is, you ready for this? I'm not even kidding. They said we have some like requirements documents and things like that. We're like, no, don't do that. Just don't do that. We'll show up Monday morning, we'll sit down in the room with you, and we'll start building it collaboratively. And that's how we did it. That was the process. Pretty fancy, huh? It turns out that human beings are built to work that way. The tools weren't before, but the tools are now. Okay? So we can work that way, which is awesome. 4 hours. That's a project, right? This company had invested a bunch of money to make a change to their business to improve it, but they started to think that maybe it was hurting their business instead. They were thinking about reversing the decision, paying the money again to go in the opposite direction, because it's costly every time they make this change. It involves some construction work on their stores, okay? They were about to pull the trigger and reverse it. And in 4 hours, we proved pretty conclusively to them that it was working. It was adding $5 million a year to the bottom line, but they were prepared to spend $3 million in the near term for the pleasure of losing that $5 million year over year over year over year. Okay? 4 hours. That's pretty cool. We found $14 million one time. Just found it, like under a rock. This company, we were just working with them for 2 days, and on the second day, this number $14 million appeared on the screen, as a result of a really sophisticated, just a regular DAX formula. And there was this moment of shock and silence, and then they said, well, that's $14 million in discounts that we gave our customers last year, apparently, in a category where our customers never notice or care about discounts. So it's $14 million they just threw away. So we really didn't find $14 million. We found $14 million times however many years that company stays in operation, going forward. And if we could figure out how to charge percentage of money saved, I wouldn't be standing here, would I? I'd be in Costa Rica. Yeah. All right. 3 people part-time for a month. 1 person from our company, 2 people from the client company. All 3 of us had other jobs going on at the time. None of us was full-time. In this example, we didn't even set foot physically on site with them. Like the help that we provided, the assistance we provided it completely remotely over the internet, right? Web meeting and things like that, okay? It made their stock price go up. That's a metric we like. Stock price up. And then the last one, my personal favorite. Again, 1 week. This time it was 2 people full time. Okay, so it was a solid week. It was none of this part-time stuff. It was a hard week, really hard. They tell us that they can absolutely, provably state that it's adding $25 million a year to their bottom line. This was a Power Pivot workbook, folks. It was a workbook. And it's still, I think they've transitioned it to Power BI since then, which again is not a rewrite. It's just a port, like one-click port. It's awesome. And that's per year. This thing, which is still running, in some sense, is actually running this company in some ways, right? Is entering its 4th year of service, so it's coming up on being a $100 million workbook. And a plus $100 million workbook, not a minus, because We've heard stories of minus $100 million workbooks, right? Have you heard the story about the self-service BI vendor software company that sold itself for $100 million less than it should have because of an Excel error? Not making it up. That happened. And they marketed themselves as being like a replacement for Excel. Oh, karma. Okay, we've talked about two traditional choices. I don't want to spend much time on this one. I want to save the time for demos. I'm really big on perspective. And I just want to say that, like, all these things I'm saying, like, the existing world has been bad. No one's to blame. No one's been doing anything wrong. Like, if the BI department takes 17 months to deliver something that's not very good, it's not them. It's the industry that did this to them. So, forgiveness and acceptance is a big deal here. So this is the one I wanted to get to. A very important point. Human beings do not know what they need until they have seen what they asked for. Okay? In other words, there's always iteration. None of the traditional processes were geared around the acknowledgement that iteration was crucial. You should never, ever again expect to write a requirements document and execute on it and be done. It's dumb to think that. It's just dumb. Never again, okay? Like the entire software engineering industry has come around to this. Like we've switched from waterfall methodology to agile methodology. And a lot of lip service is paid to agile BI now, okay? But if you're not like sitting in a room with the stakeholders building it in real time or awfully close to that sort of dynamic, then you're not agile yet. And if you're still doing big requirements documents that are like double-digit pages in length, there's a lot of opportunity left. Let me just say it that way, rather than picking on you. Okay, there's a lot of opportunity to get better. And look, the next bullet was exactly that. So it's almost like I wrote these slides. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the slide that if I do it, they have to edit the video because there's a Star Trek picture in here, and last year they had to blur this out of the YouTube video. So you know what? I'm going to do them a favor, okay? And we're not going to do that slide. Okay? Oh no, we did the slide. Sorry. All right. So let's just do the demos, okay? This is an Excel-focused talk rather than a Power BI-focused talk. But it's the same languages, it's the same thing, it doesn't matter. It's just that you get to it with a different start menu shortcut and you have a different set of charts and visualizations at your disposal. The core stuff, the important stuff, is the same. If you learn one, you're learning them both. Isn't that awesome? I still can't believe that I can say that with a straight face, but it's the truth. My friend and business colleague, Bill Jelen, who runs the MrExcel.com website and is also the single most prolific author of Excel books on the planet in human history, he likes to joke that our book, if we renamed our book to be solving the budget versus actuals problem in Excel, and just had it be one chapter long, and then the rest of the book just be blank white paper to make it heavy, we could charge 10 times as much for it than what we do today. So what I'm going to show you here is something that is just, it's impossible in regular Excel. And it's so simple, and yet it's impossible. So I've got these different tables of data, 5 different tables of data, and the important thing here is that, I'll look at the data view really quickly. I've got a table of sales data, It's got 60,000 rows in it. Okay? And then I've got a table of calls, phone calls, customer service support calls, 7,000 rows. No amount of VLOOKUP is going to save you when you have this particular shape of problem. Right? There's nothing you can do in regular Excel. This is something that regular BI tools have always had this ability, but we've never put it, until recently, put it in the hands of the business. So if I go back to diagram view, and I just finish wiring all of this up, this is even like fun. This is like paint by numbers type of stuff, right? Like who doesn't enjoy it? This is a real zen pleasure in dragging and dropping stuff like this, you know? So let's see here. I've got a few relationships hooked up there. I've got call date, product ID, you know. You get this cool looking like integrated circuit board type of diagram, you know. Well, what I just did there, in some sense I could say I just wrote several hundred VLOOKUPs, or the equivalent of it, right before your very eyes, but I did better than that. I did something that you can't do with VLOOKUP. So if I create a pivot table off of this data set, unlike regular pivots, we see all of the tables at once. Very awesome. And I've written a couple of formulas ahead of time just to make my life a little easier, but they're simple formulas. If I put, let's say, products on here, like product subcategory on my pivot, okay, and then I go up here and I grab sales dollars and support call minutes, we are now looking at an impossible pivot table. This thing couldn't be done in regular Excel. You could get something that looked like this, but it wouldn't be a pivot table. And why is that significant? Because if someone wants me to iterate, and what do? They always want me to iterate. However long it took me to get to this result traditionally, might have been, depending on how quick you are, probably half an hour or more to get to this in regular Excel. But when someone wants you to iterate, it'll take you another half an hour or another several hours. For us, it's going to be one click. We can rearrange this thing. If they say, hey, I want to see this broken out by like customer demographic, like male versus female. I was making the joke in my pre-conference session this weekend. There's someone wanted to see this broken out by gender. In traditional Excel, the only proper professional response is to tell them, you know, to go pound sand, right? You're not going to do it. It's going to take you too long. But for us, it's one click to get it broken out that way. And it's one click basically to get it broken out any way we want. This tool set's built for iteration, whereas traditional Excel without these engines was not. And by the way, when you do this one click to give them what they asked for, there's a half-hour waiting period before you give it to them. Okay? Because you really do need to preserve some mystery. And if you let them see the checkbox, if you let them see you check that checkbox, all they will think is that it's just a checkbox. They'll go back to devaluing what you do instantaneously. Okay? But this is the truth. You earned that checkbox. You know? You came to conferences, you read books, you trained up, right? And you built things the right way so that checkbox works and does what you want it to do. It's not a check. That's the last thing that's the last part of the process. It hides everything else. Do not let them see the checkbox. Right? That's funny, but it's also real advice. The only pushback we've ever gotten on this advice is people come back to us later and say it's more like 60 or 90 minutes. You know? Okay, so let's take gender back off of there. Now, I'm going to write another formula really quick. And if someone told us, like a very expensive consulting firm, told us that every minute we were on the phone with a customer, let's see here, support call minutes, costs us, one form or another, all told, $1.50. Now we can put a price on customer support. And it's not just customer support, it's also like decreased customer satisfaction. The longer they're on the phone with us, the less likely they are to buy our stuff next time, things like that, right? So now we've got a cost of support number right here in the same pivot. That's kind of nice. But But some of these things, like does it make sense to spend $150,000 supporting road bikes? Maybe, because look at the sales of road bikes. Whereas $8,000 spent supporting bottles and cages, which is like drinking bottles for bicycles. Maybe that's a big deal because we haven't sold that much in terms of dollars. Okay, so we can write another quick formula that'll be support as percentage of sales. Let's just do a ratio. And we'll use the fancy divide function that protects us from division by zero errors. So cost of support divided by sales dollars. We'll format that as a percentage. There we go. It sort of flies off the screen. So I'm just going to take these other things off of here. I don't actually need to see them for them to work. And let's throw a little conditional formatting on this. A higher number is worse in this case. Yes. Oh my goodness. What is going on? We're just getting killed on socks. Okay. And then someone wants me to iterate. They say, I want to see it broken out by, like by gender. We just want to see if men or women are struggling more with these things. And men are struggling more with socks, it turns out. But women aren't in any position to brag. They're both bad. Now, look at what we just did. This is crazy. If you look at these numbers and think about what's really going on here, this is the sum of certain rows in the sales table, actually the sum of certain rows in the calls table, multiplied by another number, and then divided by the sum of another set of rows in a completely different table being displayed, and then split out by a column in a third table, actually, and a fourth table. One table here, and then there's two tables going into each of these numbers. And look how fast we got here. If I wasn't talking about it, if I was just jamming through it, building it, I could get to this result in probably, 2 minutes from scratch. Blank workbook, 2 minutes, I'm at this result and ready to iterate. That's a big deal. Yes? Do you like it? Some of you, are aware of this. If you're not aware of this, this is what you should be doing. And the same thing is possible in Power BI as what I'm showing here. All right, let's move on. While this one's loading, I can take a question. Okay? This one takes a second. Even on my solid state drive, this one takes a moment. Someone throw me a question. Yes? What's the best way to figure out a data model? Wow. Can you ask me a question that's like multiple choice? The best way to figure out a data model that someone else built? Oh, to pick up something someone else has built. Well, the short version for me is I always go to diagram view first. Okay? I go to diagram view, and then I grab what I call our lookup tables. You might think of them as dimension tables, and I arrange them across the top of the diagram view. And then I took all my data tables, aka fact tables, okay, and arranged them in a row on the bottom. So I get this 2-row experience, and that's how I start every sort of like forensic investigation of what the heck a model is doing. Okay, that's not the whole story, but invariably, that's always, I think, the place to start. Okay, I want you to see this table here. It might be a little too small, but maybe there's 162 million rows in this one table. And if that's not enough, this other table next to it has another 141 million rows. So we have a 300 million row workbook. And this is a pivot table built against those 300 million rows. This is against the 161 million rows. This is against the 140 million rows. It's another multi-table example. This sort of report, first of all, you can't get 300 million rows in a traditional Excel spreadsheet, right? Secondly, if you've got multiple tables, 300,000 rows with a bunch of VLOOKUP or SUMIF or whatever is going to bring your computer to its knees. I'm going to click a slicer over here so that we can recalculate it while I keep talking, okay? So you can see, how long it takes to recalc. About a second. It recalcs, near instantly. And by the way, this pivot table is large, okay? It's calculating a lot of intersections of the data. If I go to the bottom of this pivot table, you will see that we're like 18,000 rows down the spreadsheet. There's 36,000 independent calculations being crunched against 300 million rows of data in that 1 second. And, so yeah, there's really kind of there's no ceiling, no practical ceiling. And if you get to 3 billion rows, like 10 times the size of this, there's always SSAS tabular waiting to absorb this workbook as a one-step import. Doesn't change the formulas, doesn't change the syntax, none of it. It all stays the same. Okay. You know, we taught the words cube formulas are in the title of this talk, so maybe I should show a little bit of that. You know, and by the way, I already have that scorecard at the very beginning was assembled using cube formulas. Cube formulas are not like a modeling technique. They're not an alternative to DAX or anything like that. They are just an alternative visualization technique, an alternative report design technique in Excel. So here I have a pivot table, okay? And it's sliceable, as you would expect, okay? The numbers recalc, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to go onto the Analyze ribbon tab here under this terrible name button, OLAP Tools, which I actually named when I worked at Microsoft, so I'm picking on myself, and click this Convert to Formulas button. Now, this is only an option for Power Pivot tables, and a very rare breed of pivot table is called an OLAP pivot table, which, you know, in a former life we cared about. Okay? So what happened? I don't have a pivot table anymore. There's no pivot table ribbon tab up here any longer. So what does that mean? That means I can do weird stuff like this. I can insert a column in the middle, which I used to not be able to do, right? And I can insert a row in the middle here. I can do some weird formatting type of things if I want. And I'm not the world's greatest aesthetic designer, which is an understatement. Oh, I just changed the font color, didn't I? I always do that. There we go. All right, so this looks a little different, doesn't it? Now, does it still recalculate? Oh, it does. It's still live. And it's gonna refresh. When we refresh the data, like on a scheduled refresh, that's also going to still update the data. So this gives us the opportunity to do completely free-form layout. And this is where scorecards come from, okay, in Excel. Like that shape that I showed you, that visualization that I showed you at the very beginning, is a very uniquely Excel type of shape. I don't think there's too many BI tools on the planet that can rock that particular scorecard shape. Not necessarily that you have to. That was a pretty dense screenshot, wasn't it? You know? But that's real, and it's working. You can do scorecardy type of things, absolutely, in Power BI environment as well, like using like the card view visualization, for instance. You just don't get quite as much real estate to work with. You can't display quite as many metrics. I also want you to see a couple other things here really quickly. This is a picture. I put it in Excel just for impact, but this is a screenshot from an Excel report that we were building with a client. Do you see this right here? The 39.3%? That is a single cell with a power pivot, a DAX measure behind it, but then we layered a spark line over the top of it that indicates the trend, the 5-year trend, or is it more than 5? No, it's like a 6 or 7-year trend for that same metric. We like to call this Frankenspark. Okay? If you go to powerpivotpro.com, our website, and you search in the search box, you search on Frankenspark, you'll find the technique that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to lay out a visual like this. Okay? So cube formulas, it's one thing I want to make sure. How many of you have seen cube formulas before today? Look at you. How did you know? Who told you? I told you? And you still showed up to a cube formulas talk? I'm glad I talked about something other than cube formulas, in addition to cube formulas anyway. All right, so I just want to give you one more thought about cube formulas, just to show you, I'm not recommending that you do something like this, okay? This is the single hardest thing I've ever done in Excel. this custom calendar visualization. But this is 100% performed with cube formulas. And you notice that the data set is alien abductions. Okay? It's not real. At least we hope it's not real. But just to give you an idea of just how far you can go with cube formulas, you can construct anything you want, as long as it's somewhat grid-shaped, using cube formulas. All right, so my timer's blinking, so I should probably stop yapping at you. But I'm going to be hanging out a little bit. Maybe if we spill out into the breezeway out there, answering questions, whatever. Thank you all for coming. Much appreciated.